Aloha and welcome back to another episode of Inside the Senate. My name is Jacob Aki, and today I'm pleased to be joined by Senate Majority Leader J. Kalani English. Senator English represents Senate District 7, which includes the areas of Hana, Eastern Upcountry Maui, Molokai, Lanai, and Kaho'olawe. Senator, thank you for joining us.
Aloha.
Senator, before we talk about some of the pressing topics that are being talked about in the community and at the legislature, please share with those at home a little bit about you and how a boy from Hana ended up becoming the majority leader of the Hawaii State Senate.
Yeah, thank you, Jacob. Well, that's a long story, but the bridge version is, I'm from Hana. I was Hanai to my maternal grandparents, and I was raised by them, and then spent my life with them in a little village called Hamoa, which is a few miles past Hana town. And so growing up in Hana was very different back in those days. I mean, most of the people that I grew up with, because it was the older generation, spoke Hawaiian at the time. Anyway, I went to Hana School and then went to Kamehameha in 1980 for my high school, graduated in 1984, and then went on to college. My degrees are in Pacific Island Studies, which is a very unique, obscure degree too, right? It's not many people go into that field.
Yeah.
But it's my passion, right? The islands. So I ended up getting a master's degree in Pacific Island Studies, and I was a fellow at the East-West Center at the Institute of Culture and Communications. So when I was in graduate school, it was a really interesting. It was the end of the Cold War in the 90s, and a lot of countries became independent. So the Federated States of Micronesia, what used to be called the Trust Territory of the Pacific Islands, was going through their independence process, and my suite mates at the East-West Center were students from those countries that eventually became the diplomats of those countries, and now they're running these countries. But I ended up working for the Federated States of Micronesia at the UN. So I went to New York, lived there in the early mid-90s, and worked for the Micronesian government in establishing their diplomatic relations and establishing themselves as an independent state. My grandparents were getting old, but my grandfather got sick, and so I returned home to Hana to take care of them. And then, so coming back from the UN, going back to Hana was, from New York City back to Hana was in your mid-20s was difficult. And we're dealing with a lot of land issues and things like that. So anyway, they said, why don't you run for office? You have all these ideas, and I did. I was appointed. I didn't win my first race for the Maui County Council. I was appointed to the Maui County Council. Then I won my second race there. And then I ran for the Senate. So I came to the Senate in 2000, and I've been here ever since. So that's a quick story, from it's 20 or 21, so 20 years in the Senate. In fact, Jacob, I was just remembering and reminiscing, sitting here in my office. I've never moved offices. In the Senate, people move around, and I've been in this office for 20 years. So you can imagine there's a lot of good memories here and a lot of stuff as well. Yeah.
Definitely, there's definitely a lot of history there. And I think for those that don't know, Senator English was also a staffer at the Hawaii State Senate in the mid-1990s. So, really a story about someone who was born in Hana, worked at the international level, came back home to serve, and he's been serving in the Hawaii State Senate for the past 20 years. Senator, COVID-19 has definitely had an impact on many of our communities across the state. And in our previous episodes, we've had a perspective from Kauai, we've had a perspective from here on Oahu, but what has the impact of COVID-19 been like? You represent multiple islands. You have half of Maui, Molokai, and Lanai. So what was the impact of COVID for those small places there?
Well, that's the thing. It was it was all a first impression, right? We've never had this in modern times, and that's the part I want to stress is there's a memory in the Hawaiian, memory of
Mm-hmm.
pandemics and of great loss during pandemics in Hawaiian history. So all of our families experience great losses. Um, so this is the first time in over 100 years that we've had a pandemic like this. And so, I remember the first days of it here at the Senate and how we shut down the Senate,
Mm-hmm.
shut down the legislature. And then, I remember Senator Gilkey Dagaran and myself, because we stayed back, with the Senate president to run the place. And
Mm-hmm.
there was one afternoon where we just said, it's probably best for us to go home to Maui. And we literally got off the plane in Maui, and that's when they shut everything down. So had we not gone home, we probably would have been stuck on Oahu. But it impacted us in so many different ways, because think of systems coming to a complete stop, and transportation systems. So Molokai, Lanai, Kaho'olawe, Maui all depend on air traffic, um, boat traffic, barges, things like that. So I went home to Hana. I always said that, and it was, people were observing, because I've always told my family and neighbors at home that, if you see me coming home to Hana and to bunker down, something is really bad is happening out there. And people took notice that, oh, he's not in session. They just shut down and he came home. So we had to first deal with some really basic things. We had stranded people. We had people without resources, and then they didn't have an ability to return to where they're from. So we had to bill it. The word I'll use is bill it, right? We had to put people up, take care of them immediately. As we got people back to where they're from or to other accommodations, then we had to deal with things like food supply. So for Hana, we had 2 stores. We were dependent on trucks bringing in food every day, and so those supply lines were interrupted. On Molokai and Lanai, it was the barges coming in, and we had limited food there. And then we had to deal with what do we do? We had everything stopped. We asked people to stay home, don't go out. How do we deal with basic things like communication? So it was a very stressful time for people.
During this pandemic, I do remember that you and Representative Decoit worked very hard to shut down Hana Highway. And if I'm not mistaken, that's the first time in our state's history where a community was completely blocked off. For a couple of months, we've actually had the National Guard out there, and you deployed fairly quickly a system of getting residents passes. Can you talk about that? Because I know for some, especially those who may not live in East Maui, they were wondering how come they couldn't go out there. But yet for the residents, they actually felt safe knowing that for at least some time, there was a regulation of traffic in and out of their district. Can you briefly talk about that?
Well, so it was an extraordinary move, because Representative Decoit, Lynn Decoit, and myself, sat down and we looked at the situation, and we worked with Mayor Victorino. And beginning of the pandemic, we didn't know anything about what coronavirus was. We didn't know really how it was transmitted. We don't know, what it did. And we had no cases in Hana. At the East Maui, we have, very little medical infrastructure. And, 1 or 2 people sick would have overloaded our whole system. So we wrote a letter to the governor asking him to deploy the National Guard on the state side of the Hana Highway, the front side. The mayor, who controls the backside, which is a county road, so he joined in making the request. So we had National Guard on both sides, in Kaupo, or actually in Ulupalakua, and then by Honopo area in the east side of Maui. And what this did was it created first of all, an insular, more isolated community. So our people, we asked them not to travel out as well, unless absolutely necessary. Doctors, food supplies, things like that. But Jacob, you remember this, right? We had to design we had to figure out a system overnight. Literally, we had less than a day to do this. Of how do we give residents something that they have that's like a pass or an identification? So you were my chief of staff at that time, and you designed a pass that had both the state seal and the county seal on it. We mass produced them here at the Capitol, and then with the help of Mokulele Airlines, they volunteered. They flew in the passes to Hana. I remember picking them up at about 3 or 4 in the afternoon. And then, I took them to all the places to get distributed. Took them to the police station, the gas station, Hana store, Hasegawa store, the post office.
Everywhere.
Hana Health. And then, I had to do this run because now we have all the small villages going out towards Kaupo and towards Ulupalakua. So I asked the neighbor, I said, please drive me, and we're going to go. It's going to be a long night, but I called ahead and had different villages. People don't realize that we have Maua in Kaupo. It's a village up above Kaupo. Kaikinui, all of these other places. And I remember having, meeting people on the side of the road, whole communities. They would come down from up in the mountains. We would meet basically now it's dark. And I would explain what's going on and said, okay, we're shutting down the road. Tomorrow, the National Guard will be out. This is your pass to get in and out. Fill in your name on it. And it was really an extraordinary thing to do because everybody came together. I had other people then taking stacks of those passes and relaying them out to the really remote areas, areas with 1 or 2 families. And then going back towards Kailua and towards the Kahului side, Keanai, Nahiku, we had people running them out there as well. So within a 24-hour period, we're able to run it through the attorney generals, make sure that it was legal, that it met legal stature, get it produced, get it out to East Maui, and then get it distributed. So the next day, when the National Guard was there, our residents were prepared. Those that needed to go out had a pass. And it really gave us a little bit of respite, some time to just reflect. It did a couple of really interesting things. The first was I have not seen Hana this quiet since my early childhood. And the place began to rest. People, areas started to regenerate after the first month. And locals, our old families started going back to places we haven't gone to for years because it was overrun with tourists, with people. So Hana got used to it again. And, that's led to a number of discussions. So the other thing that we did, Representative DeCoit and I, was, Zoom was quite new at this time, right?
Yes, so at that point, and I do remember that you and Representative DeCoit actually held a number of different virtual town hall, and we really didn't know what we were doing at that time, but all we knew was that we needed to get information out to the public. So both you, Representative, and even the mayor held a number of town hall meetings for the people of East Maui, multiple meetings for those on Molokai, Lanai, and your meetings attracted hundreds of people just wanting to come and find out what was going on. Can you talk about that? Because I think what you folks were doing at that time, I don't think you really knew, but all you knew was that you needed to get information out.
Right. So what Lynn and I wanted to do is, we said, okay, we have the largest. I have the largest district, right? Is geographic district, and diverse and spread out. So, we said, well, let's just try and do some Zoom meetings. And what we did was, we said, okay, we're going to present as much information that we have. Yes. We're going to present it in a way that, this is what we know. And we also brought resources. I mean, I remember the governor joined us on the first couple of meetings. He took a lot of hard questions from people. Directors of different departments came on, Department of Health, Transportation, others. And, what we found it was okay to say, we don't know, right? When somebody would ask a question, we said, we don't know. We'd have to go and look at this. It's all new. But what we did find was that people appreciated the instant communication, right? So we started doing large district-wide community meetings, and we started answering a lot of questions, laying a lot of fears, putting that aside for people, and also letting people know that help is there. We did things like huge food drives and huge amounts of movement of foods into Molokai and Lanai and upcountry and East Maui, and the distribution systems that came together were absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I do want to mention that, out of this COVID-19 pandemic, yes, it has had a negative impact on us in so many ways, but for many communities, not just in Hana, you said that many of our natural resources were able to rejuvenate. Local people were able to go back to beaches and sites that they haven't been to for many years. But this got you thinking about how do we reset?
Right.
Obviously, the way we were doing tourism prior to COVID wasn't sustainable. It was having a negative impact on your district, particularly in East Maui. But you held a number of different community meetings to try and find out what is the solution, because the obvious thing is we can't go back to what was. And you've been working very hard, pretty much for the past year now, of trying to come up with a system of better managing not just traffic, but better managing the flow of tourists and visitors into East Maui. Can you talk about that? And you've named it Maui Wayfinding.
Yeah.
So if you could share that.
Yeah. So, this evolved from our community meetings, right? Because every people, almost to a person, would come up and say, we kind of like it like this, and we're doing stuff because we can actually get to the beach, or we can actually get to the mountains, and because people had time. But the constant theme that we heard was, okay, but we don't want to go back. In fact, a lot of people just said, keep the road closed, and we can't do that. So, that you're right. It got me thinking, because I said, well, unless we do something to change the dynamic, then when we do go back to whatever normal is, we're going back to what it was. And so unless we put something in place to change that, so that's why we came up, initially we tried to figure out how do we control traffic into East Maui. The answer is we can't. We can't do a toll road. That's unconstitutional. And, the state puts about $30 million plus a year into that highway. So a toll would be very expensive. And of course, you cannot discriminate. Everybody would have to pay it, including residents. So, the fact that it's unconstitutional, and my lights just went out, excuse me, there. The fact that it's unconstitutional ended that whole, debate. Nonetheless, we looked at how we can influence the decisions of tourists. And, then we came to this idea of, well, let's create a reservation system. Let's look at how people will, by having reserved times and set times, it creates a de facto schedule for them, right? So that was the idea. And we looked to Hanalei and Haena on Kauai and how they did their park over there. So in Wainapanapa State Park, we put in place this is just the beginning of the whole thing for East Maui. We're trying to do it for the whole east side, but we started with what we had control over, which is Wainapanapa State Park. And we put in a reservation system, and they're now paying. So it's been March, it went into effect in March.
Yeah, and can you share just how much parking fees the state is collecting just in the first month of operation?
Yeah, so it's beyond basically all the projections we had. It's way beyond it. The estimate is it's going to bring in about $1.2 to $1.7 million a year on the initial projections. And now with what's actually coming in, we're predicting it's going to be a lot more than that. So, the numbers were something, what was it, Jacob? 310, 315 reservations a day, which is the max that they can do. And then, that equals somewhere about, $4,000 a day, $5,000 a day, something like that. But you time this out, it's, now we went from everything was free So the locals, if you have a Hawaii driver's license, you have free parking. You don't pay to get in. It's a state park, and the state does that. But for our visitors, they have to make a reservation. They go out to gowainapanapa.com, which is a deal on our website. They make a reservation, they pay a fee, and then they get sent a QR code. So when they come to Wainapanapa, oh, and by the way, we created 8 jobs in Hana. So there's 8
That's a
people.
lot for Hana.
Yeah, that's a lot for Hana. And these 8 people are, attending to the parking and the codes. But when people come in, they scan the codes. They have a time. It's a 2-hour time frame that they can go into the park. So what it's done is it's limited the number of people in the park, so it's much more enjoyable for everyone there. Everybody's guaranteed a parking, so you're not fighting for parking.
Mhm.
And they have a set time, so people know their time there. The reaction from the tourists has been great. A lot of them don't know about the reservation system, so they're given a code that said, okay, drive to Hana where you can get the Wi-Fi, make a reservation there, and then come back. And a lot of them do that. So we're going to perfect the system. And what we're also doing now, this is MauiWayfinding.com. Maui Wayfinding is trying to put our businesses and our sites, etc., online. So you can have an app, you can go online to this site, create your reservations, and basically, let's say you want to come to Hana and you want to do a tour of the cacao farm that's in Hana. You can make a reservation there. You want to go to the fish shack in Hana, or you want to go to Prani's Thai food, or you want to go to Makai Cafe. You can pre-order your lunch, pre-order your food. You want to buy a T-shirt from Hasegawa store. It says, I survived the Hana Highway. You can pre-order that, and you pay for it all. This is what we're hoping to build, right? You pay for it all with one credit card. You get a QR code, and you show up at these places. They have your orders ready. You scan your QR code, so now it's cashless. It's touch, non-touch interaction, and it helps our local businesses get some revenues and some stability. You're not just guessing. I think a lot of people are coming today. Let's prep, 400 meals. We have orders for 200 meals. Let's prep them because they're prepaid and we know when they're coming.
So it's really a new way of doing tourism, right? It is that instead of the tourists trying to rush out to Hana, once they make their reservations, they know that when they get there, their food will be ready, their time slot at the park will be ready, and this doesn't only improve the visitor experience, but ultimately, I think what you're trying to get at is that this is going to aim to also improve the lives of local people, so that they have the opportunity to also make a living and receive some of the economic benefits of our visitor industry. We have about 4 minutes left, and I think what you've really shared so far is that with COVID, many of our communities have had the time to really think about how we do things different. Throughout the number of community meetings that you've had over the past year, the message that you always share with folks is that we have an opportunity to do things different.
Right.
Because of this COVID-19 pandemic. Not only have we realized, that we need to diversify our economy and that we need to do things differently, but we've also made some huge technological leaps. The legislature is almost entirely virtual. Island residents, the Senate, Neighbor Island residents, no longer have to travel to Honolulu.
This was a big point, is that with the technology, my district gets front row seats, because previously, if you wanted to come in from Lanai, you'd have to fly in, come in to testify, rent a car, rent whatever, come into the Capitol a whole day and then go back. Now you go online, you go to hawaii.capitol.gov, there's a whole system in there to register to testify. You can easily say, I support, I oppose, your comments, put your testimony in. And then if you want to testify in person or virtually, you'll get a link and you have a time and you come in and testify. So it's really the great equalizer for my district.
Yeah. So with all of that. We've definitely made a lot of improvements. But where do we go from here? We have about 2 minutes left, and you've been in the Senate for the past 20 years. I mean, you've definitely seen Hawaii, in and out of an economic recession, and now with this COVID-19 pandemic. But what is your outlook on Hawaii for the next 5, 10 years, and where do we go from here?
Yeah, that's a really broad question. I mean, first of all, we spend a lot of time talking about when Hawaii reopens, when it comes back, and it's already happened. I mean, we are open again. Tourists are back. I mean, the numbers are staggering. 22,000 yesterday came in, and at our highest point before the pandemic, we're at 35,000 a day. So we're pretty close to that. But the opportunity was and still is that we can change the systems that we need to change now before we get back to full swing. And part of it is I think everybody's dissatisfied with mass tourism. In fact, I think the idea of mass tourism is power for Hawaii. Now it's quality tourism, it's controlled tourism. The tourists themselves want a better, more authentic experience. So, with all of that, that's the opportunity to start diversifying and then bringing more of our small guys into the economic mix. So that's this whole thing of MauiWayfinding.com. Well, is to give all the small guys, the guy selling coconuts on the side of the road can have an online presence and have pre-sales for his coconuts, right? That it's all paid for. They show him the code, they get their coconut, and at the end of the day, his money's deposited into his account. So we're trying to reset how that operates so that it's equal and more fair for our local people. And also, I built in, or we built into Wainapanapa, the ability to shut the park down when there's akule in the bay, or when there's a cultural event, or even just the kupuna want to go down. Yep. We can say, okay, we'll close it off for the day, no tourists, and we can go. So that's the difference, right? How do we reintegrate our place back into our space, right?
Yep. Senator, we have about 40 seconds left, and this is obviously one of the toughest legislative sessions. The session is set to adjourn on April 29th. Any last thoughts on, as we head into this final stretch?
Yeah, we have, it's the most stressful session I think we've ever had. And we just ask everybody to, be very open and be very patient, because yes, there's a lot going on, but we've never faced this before. So, there's going to be mistakes made. We're trying to correct those, and there's going to be some really good things that come out of this. So together we'll get through it, and hopefully we'll make it a better and stronger Hawaii.
Thank you, Senator. We are out of time, but I want to thank you for joining us. And for those of you at home, tune in to our next episode of Inside the Senate in 2 weeks. Take care and stay safe. Aloha.